New Zealand bush, a great place to enjoy a quiet moment, the chance for reflection. Appreciating nature and celebrating the seasons is an important part of Druidry, which is undergoing something of a revival in New Zealand. At the recent equinox, Druids gathered from all around the country in Wairarapa. One of them was Cris Mullane, who became a Druid about 15 years ago after rediscovering his Celtic origins. And as much as he now enjoys his role as the self-appointed Druid of Devonport, he has to fit this in around his other commitments, including his work on the Agent Orange project for Vietnam vets. It's a challenge he took up after his old friend Alistair Ross fought and lost a 30-year battle with the deadly chemical.
You know, when you promise somebody on something on their deathbed, well, you'd better make sure it happens.
So you did take up that. What was the particular issue that Alistair charged you with?
Well, the main issue really was that veterans and their families, not just the veterans themselves, had been ignored, mistreated for some 35 years in terms of that very unpopular war in Vietnam. But the veterans themselves became the target both of the protesters during the war and the subsequent being ignored by officialdom and lied about and you know, called potty and all sorts of things. There's a deep grievance there, and of course all of these things have flowed on to the families in various ways, as you'd imagine they do. The government and ourselves, representing the Vietnam veterans, have signed a memorandum of understanding to address many of the issues, not all. We've made it clear to the government that we're still, you know, still issues on the table, but for the meantime we want to get on with implementing what is there, because so many have already died, leaving their families in difficult situations, both financially and emotionally.
Chris, you yourself served in Vietnam.
Yes, I did. Yes.
Tell us a little about that experience.
Well, I was an infantry platoon commander in Vietnam in 1971 with Victor 6 Company. It was a watershed experience, I suppose, for a young man. I was 23. I had my 23rd birthday in Vietnam. It's contributed to my spiritual journey in a number of ways. You can't sort of experience some of those things without it affecting the way you look at life, death, the world. You know, so I don't claim to have learned the meaning of life from it, but,
no.
But maybe got a bit of an inkling as to what it might mean.
What were the sort of experiences that forced you to reevaluate your spiritual life?
If you take chemicals that are quite harmful and you spray them into the ecosystem, then it's understandable that, you know, you screw with nature and nature's going to screw with you. You know, I mean, it's just a natural action-reaction sort of thing.
When did you make the connection between this sort of thing and Druidry?
When you're lying on the jungle floor in an ambush or in a cut-off position and there's a major battle, and you're lying there and there's all these beautiful butterflies and insects and things happening around you, and in the distance you can hear the gunfire and the tanks and the helicopters. There's an interesting sort of dichotomy about life, and you sort of, you know, here's the beauty of the butterflies and everything, and here's this terrible carnage that's being wreaked. For what purpose? One way of dealing with emotional issues and stress and things like that, for me, is to write poetry, to express what I'm seeing and feeling in poetry. And that's a nice outlet. See, soldiers deal with the stress of war and the things they're experiencing in many different ways. Some become quite callous on the outside. Humour is a big thing for soldiers in terms of dealing, particularly with Maori soldiers, you know. Other people withdrew into themselves. I found I was doing that, so I sort of expressed it on. It was good to have it sort of come out in poetry, yeah.
Now at last, Eld's fight is over. He had nothing left to give. And I sometimes feel guilty. He should die while I should live. But I know that he'll be waiting for me when my own last post draws near. And I'm sure he's up in heaven, 'cause he went through hell down here. a war without end. Amen.
Vietnam is clearly one of the experiences. Are there other particular experiences that have led you to a point when you were able to come out as a Druid, as it were?
Yes, coming out as a Druid sounds sort of interesting. Well, other markers where I had a young son who died at 3 months, and I discovered him, discovered him and tried to resuscitate him endlessly. And those sort of, those sort of hiatuses in one's life tend to add to that.
So at what point did you actually recognise that the kind of philosophy of life that you had actually matched Druidry?
15 years ago, when I started taking more of an interest in the Irish language, my own heritage, wanting to know more about my grandparents who came from Ireland, and researching some of that sort of led me to look at, so what were their beliefs, what were their spiritual backgrounds, what were their connectedness with the forces of nature and of the earth. Plus some of my own experiences post-Vietnam and so on, some of my own sort of personal life experiences, sort of raised lots of questions for me. The inevitable question of what is the meaning of life, I think I'm now probably more confused than I ever was about the answer to that. There's a peacefulness about the Druid philosophy, not only in terms of its connecting with earth and nature and our role in the universe, if you like, but also in terms of it not being a dogmatic system of belief, of spiritualism. We welcome each other here to our ceremony, and after a week of work, a moment to pause in our labours and to be here in the present. And to help us do that and to be in the moment, let us take 3 breaths. First, with the earth beneath us.
So you're part of a grove of Druids in Auckland?
Yeah, well, we have a group called Fellowship of Druids Aotearoa, or FODA or FODA.
Right.
We call upon the spirits of the West, of the element of water, the water that fills our bodies. May there be peace in the West.
May there be peace in the West.
So tell me about Druidry, because before talking with you, Druidry is a label which I have got almost no content to put under.
The key thing is each person is free to choose their own path, provided they do no harm to themselves and no harm to anyone else.
We call on the spirits of the South and ask that they be present at our ceremony tonight. The spirits.
So if you take that into account, then you say, okay, what are the fundamental principles? First one is, there is something that is greater in the scheme of things than me.
Right.
Which is a bit of a shock for someone like me. I'm very egotistical. Goodness me, there's something bigger and greater than me. And whatever that is, some people might call it God, some people might call it, I call it the source of all creation.
Right.
Okay, or the Great Spirit.
Right.
Because, and at times I think, well, what is that? So at times I've thought, well, that's really just the collective spirit of you, me, and everybody else in the world, right? Whoever's around us. And together, that connects and makes for something greater than us as individuals. The detail of that is up to each individual to determine for themselves, and it's quite okay that in different stages of your life, having been exposed to different experiences, different learning, you might change your view as to what that is. We have already acknowledged Mother Earth, but now we need to acknowledge the coming of Mother's Day, and I particularly would like to acknowledge my mother. I will visit her graveside on Sunday and thank her for being my mother and for the gifts that she imparted to me as her son.
And I would like to acknowledge my mother and the gifts she gave to me, and also...
Another principle is that we honour the past,
Right.
so there's a connectedness across the generations. We celebrate the present and we respect the future because we're but the temporary guardians of it.
Right.
So you'll find all of those 3 very common amongst what I call First Nation spiritual beliefs. The Maori,
Right.
many would say that's very Maori. And I explain it to them, I say, oh yeah, we do the same thing. You know, these things become sacred. An understanding of the changing seasons and when to sow and when to reap and all those things that the Old Testament talks about.
Yes.
Again, you go back, you know, why did the Jews have all that? Well, it's very similar. So there's actually, I think, in all of this, much more common understanding of things than we might realise. We swear by peace and love to stand, heart to heart and hand in hand. Mark, O Spirit, and hear us now, confirming this our sacred vow. Now, let's celebrate creativity with 3 Awens.
So do you quite intentionally now make time for that celebration of the present?
Absolutely. It is the strongest of all the things about Druidry that I try and live by and enact and bring to the attention of others.
How do you enjoy the present?
Part of it is the way I start the day. With my dogs and I always go to our favourite place, no matter what the weather, and we greet the rising sun.
So you get up at whatever, 5, whatever it is.
Well, it doesn't have to be that early. but we get up early enough to be down there for when the sun
comes up over the horizon.
Yeah. And we have a little ritual.
Right.
And in their own way, the dogs join in. You know, they sense it. It's changed over the years. Sometimes it's nothing. It's just me quietly, with my eyes shut, just feeling the warmth of the rising sun, and that's enough. Other times, more recently, with my reconnecting with my Native American Indian ancestry and having some practical experiences with some of those people, is I've got this little chant that I do, which is called, basically is, "May I walk in beauty."
May I walk in beauty, may I walk in peace. Oh, all my relations, all my relations. Hey, 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 hey. All life is sacred, the mountains and the seas. All life is sacred, the animals and the trees. Oh, all my relations, all my relations. Mankind are the guardians of our Mother Earth. Mankind are the guardians of she who gave us birth. Oh, all my relations, all my relations, hey, hey, hey.
From time to time I put on my robes and just stroll through Devonport.
Greetings, are you having healthy food? You are, look at that, it's very healthy, yeah, fantastic.
And I greet people and most of the locals know me now, you know, sort of thing, pretty well, and they just go, there's silly old Chris being a Druid again.
Good to see you. Yeah, likewise.
Yeah. So people aren't quite sure, you know, whether gradually they're starting to realise I am serious about it,
yes.
but it's great to have some humour around it, and keeping people guessing is quite a good thing.
Not a bad thing.
Not a bad thing, yeah. And there's lots of bad press about Druidry going back, you know, thousands of years.
Yeah, right.
Classic example is Julius Caesar when he was in his Gallic wars. You know, he needed, as is happening right now with Iraq, he as a general, he needed to go back to the people who were funding his campaigns and say, we need more resources. So he needed a cause celeb to sort of, you know, point that out. So he would say the problem is the flaming Druids. Right. You know, they've got a stranglehold on these people, and they're very powerful, and they work nasty magic, and they're really quite evil. And so he wrote all this stuff. for his political masters to convince them, the Senate, to give him more resources, more soldiers, more money, you know.
And it's a familiar ring about it.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah. So again, another connection with Vietnam, perhaps. But anyway, so it suited him to create them and paint them as ogres, as evildoers, as people who were anti the spiritualism of Rome at the time. And so that sort of started the bad press. You do get people who sort of say, oh, "You're a druid." You know? Get behind me, Satan, sort of thing. And it's interesting because what I try to do when meeting such people is I say, okay, what is it that you've heard about druids that makes you think that? Rather than saying, no, I'm not evil and I haven't barbecued any babies recently, you know. But I'm looking at one. Have you got one? Do you have any I could barbecue? So I say to them, you know, so what is it? So best to ask them, so what is it that you're concerned about? You know, oh, well, I've heard that druids do this and druids do that, you know, and they run around in the nude and all sorts of stuff, you know. And I say, well, unfortunately, not the grove I belong to. I wouldn't mind if they did, but we don't. But the other thing is then I get into, so what is your belief? You know, what is the spiritual path that you follow that makes you feel that mine's sort of an anathema to it? See, there's so much more in common that we can acknowledge if we only know what it is. So they might say to me, well, where does Christ fit into your belief?
Right, yeah.
And I say, well, that's great. I think Christ was a very special person that the spirit of all creation placed on this earth to help us with our learning. He may well be the Son of God, but as I can't define God myself, I can't be sure of that. Right. But I respect your belief that he is the Son of God. And one day I may be enlightened enough to see that myself.
How have your family responded?
Most of them are pretty comfortable with it, I think, yeah. And they respect it, yeah.
You don't scare young children?
No.
Hello, how do you do? Do you shake hands?
They generally think I'm Gandalf, except they thought I'd trim my beard, you know. But the other thing is that one family gathering, when I turned up in one of my sets of ceremonial robes as the Druid to do a blessing and to read a gift of words that I'd crafted and to bless the meal before we consumed it and so on, this little chappie came out and he said, "Hey, look, Mum, God's arrived."
Here we are, there's people, thank you. Thank you very much.
I've moved from my youth where I was full of cocksure ignorance to where I am now I've got a sort of rather healthy self-doubt that perhaps I don't know everything after all. And it's quite surprising, really, to find out that I don't.
and maybe you can learn from people who you would never have thought that possible.
Absolutely. And even in any situation where someone has a different point of view about what's best for society, you know, should we do this or that or the other thing? And I'm a bit more open to listening to the other point of view and going, oh, actually, I've just discovered a midpoint.
So, Chris, does Druidry direct you as a Druid in the direction of any particular spiritual goals?
First one would be seeking of wisdom. The Druids would be constantly seeking wisdom, and that's why some of the things that are put out by the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids in the UK are quite helpful in that they provide written materials that people can look at. They make it very clear that this is not our equivalent of the Bible or the Quran or anything else. This is just some food for thought. And some of them are ancient legends and myths and things that, like all anecdotal sort of stuff, you know, it provides a bit of an insight into other people's view of what life's about and how to deal with the things we encounter in life and so on. And it weaves a bit of magic. You know, storytelling is so powerful, isn't it? And most of the major faiths, I think, use storytelling in various ways. There's creativity, very important, very central and core to Druidry. And that is everything from the creativity of creating human life, being part in that. But also we really celebrate creativity in all its forms, artistic forms, performance, song, dance, poetry, the visual arts, music, you know, all of those wonderful, wonderful things that are part of our spirit, right, that fuel our spirit. But you go back at the most ancient things, you know, those ancient cave drawings and things like that, people trying to express their connection with their environment, with what they felt about it inside, constantly being challenged by new ways of looking at the world through art and through creativity. And then the third one would be love. What is love? It's a bit like what is life, you know.
Yes, yes.
Love has, again, so many things that you can see in so many different ways.
How are they reflected through your daily life, Chris?
The SPCA and the St John's Ambulance have a lovely program called the Outreach program. People who have animals that are trained and selected because they're suitable to go into hospitals and rest homes and so on.
Here we are. There we are. He says, oh, there's someone who wants a pet. Yes.
And it fits with my Druidry because I think the animals, we are connected with the animals. And because animals give love unconditionally, particularly dogs. Cats I'm not so sure about. Dogs. But people do visit with cats and birds and donkeys and goats and all manner of things. And for these people to feel some touching, that it's quite healing and rewarding for them.
Lick people, he just gives cuddles.
Another principle is that having a reverence and a respect for nature.
Right.
It's a wondrous thing, nature, you know, in all its shapes, forms, colours, and being able to be at peace with nature. And some of the ritual that goes with this is if you need to chop a tree down for a good reason, and sometimes it's because the tree has become diseased.
Yes.
I like to acknowledge the tree and thank it. You know, even if you're pruning the roses,
Yes.
thanking, or you're taking the rose hips off, you know, thanking the rose for the beauty, the visual beauty that it's provided during its flowering season. But there is this fabric of life, this web, which we are all connected to and we're all part of. And it behooves us, therefore, to look at how do I connect with all these other elements of life, you know, that have life. Mm-hmm. And trees are so important to Druids. Trees are very powerful fellow travellers on the journey through life. And why is that? Very practical reasons. The trees are essential to our own existence. They take our carbon dioxide and turn it back into oxygen, you know, which is essential.
A few days ago, you were part of a significant ceremony that took place out at Stonehenge Aotearoa in the Wairarapa.
Yes.
Can you tell us about what that's about and what happened?
The equinoxes, the ceremonies, are about balance, the balance of dark and light. And it's not about good or evil. It's simply about we have this need for balance within us. So you come in, you walk sunwise around the area of the grove, or in this case the henge. The Stonehenge they built out there at Aotearoa, whilst it is not an exact replica in Vietnam, because it's not. It's a similar design transferred to fit with the southern hemisphere and our view of the stars, you see, and our seasons. And then we get into the centre of the henge in this case, and people have various roles. I was holding the north, assisted by a couple of people, others holding the other quarters, the west and the east and the south.
Let us begin by giving peace to the quarters, for without peace can no work be.
We start off by calling for peace in those quarters and call in the spirits and the elements, so the element of fire, the element of water, the element of air and the element of earth, all of which are essential to our sustenance. It was very lovely to have Philip Cargom there, the chief druid of Obod, leading the ceremony.
O Great Spirit, O Goddess, O God, O Spirit of this place, we ask for your blessings on this, our ceremony.
kencha agan atamare.
Mamnor, Tazebron, Othan Reina Ucht, Hein Reina Awolas, Haspirason Agan Henderson, Warapa Agustinach.
It's known as the last of the harvest festivals.
Bid the Maybon approach us and welcome.
And you would see in the ceremony that the Maybon, a young woman, carried a big basket full of the final fruits of the harvest.
I bear this basket of the fruits of the season as a symbol of this festival of Elven Alfed.
In this symbolic offering, recognize blessing upon your land forever. Let us all now partake of the food and drink as it is brought to us.
It goes back in human existence where our total focus was on survival. And out of that also came up this whole thing of, you are probably a threat to me. My environment is not benign. Whereas what I'm saying is we live in a benign universe.
Receive of this mead and be blessed.
And I happen to believe that there is an abundance of everything that we need to exist as a human kind and all the other animals that are related to us. We pay people to plough their crops back into the ground. I actually find that, I get to a point now I can't think about it anymore. It's painful to consider that the abundance that's available is being destroyed for the money god. And it's interesting, people are talking about the triple bottom line and all this sort of thing. As a business consultant, I have to be aware of these things, and that's good. A lot of it is still at the point of where it's talk only. We pour Agent Orange all over the countryside and then wonder why people get ill.
It brings us back to the beginning, actually, doesn't it?
It does, yeah, that's right. I mean, what is the meaning of life? I'm sort of just trying to tell you what I think it might be. I don't know what it is, but I think what it might, some elements of it that I'm sort of starting to come to grips with through my way of living the Druid life.
May fire bring you warmth and light. May air fill your body with life and your heart with joy. May water cleanse and replenish your spirit. May earth sustain you with her bounty. And may the source of all creation bless you, this day and each day forevermore. Shikon, peace to you.
This program was made with funding from New Zealand On Air.